mean, hopefully you guys will have questions because
So you
it's a
should probably
discussion.
repeat whatever question you ask into the mic so they can hear it.
Excellent point. Thank you, Haley. You don't want to trade me?
No.
Okay.
All right, well, go ahead.
3, 2.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our first ever live town hall style meeting. We are thrilled to have you join us, and we're grateful to have Mayor Joe here with us, as well as our city manager, David Larsen, joining us tonight. This is a rare treat for us to get to ask some questions. So just to let everyone be aware that we asked Facebook, our South Weaver Citizens United group, for some questions that they had. And we said we're going to pick 4 questions, and we'll spend about 15 minutes in discussion on each question. And I was so grateful for the responses that came back. These questions show how much the citizens care about what's going on in our city. And there really are some things that we're concerned about. And I am absolutely confident that Mayor Joe and David Larsen, can I just call you Dave or David?
It's fine.
Dave's fine. Okay, that Dave and Mayor Joe will be able to answer these questions and provide us some of the insight and knowledge that we're looking for right now. So we're thrilled that they're here. So we're just going to go ahead and jump in with our first question. And also, we did send these to David and Mayor Joe in advance because we feel that you didn't see them? Oh my goodness.
I told about it before we came down, so.
Okay, we wanted to give you guys an opportunity. Do you feel like this is not a situation where you have to like come up really quick with answers, but you have an opportunity to know what it is that we're discussing? So our first question that we have from Facebook. So here we go. We have heard the statement, "There's nothing we can do," in reference to the Lofts Development more than once. We understand the zoning can't be changed, but that sentiment in the wake of so many citizens gathering to express concerns feels like a dismissal of said concerns. Robert Osborne referenced having a conditional use permit specified for any development on these parcels of land back in 2017 when the rezone was approved. Has that conditional use been established with the Planning Commission and the City Council, along with city ordinance requirements for green space, percentages, parking, setbacks, aesthetic requirements, total number of allowable units for the 2.74 acres, and they have available to build, etc.? Okay, that's the first part. If yes to this, please share what the city is doing to ensure this project doesn't become the eventual blight and eyesore everyone is suspecting. If no, how do we go about getting the conditions for responsible development established now? All right, who wants to start?
Well, I'll start and then Dave can fill in the holes because I'm sure they'll be from you. But, so the lofts, first of all, and you've probably all heard this 100 times, when we tell people there's nothing we can do, that means that there's specific things that we can't change as far as this development is concerned, and that is that it is zoned for commercial overlay. It'll be the only one of that kind now because the council is looking to change that. So that's good, and that's due a lot in part to you, and you're speaking up. So, but of course the zone has certain requirements, and then but the thing is, we haven't even seen a preliminary plan yet. So as soon as we...
6 inches distance.
Oh, we're just telling you it's not very
Too close?
Too close, it's a little.
Oh, sorry. As soon as we're able to see those plans, then we can start looking at the parameters, making sure they follow everything to a T, looking for loopholes that will help us to bring down the number of units. We don't know how many units they're going to even try to get on there right now. You know, there's so many things. We've got to make sure that it's safe for our citizens as well as the citizens coming in, and that they're following each of the many guidelines that we'll have now. Conditional use permits, I will let Dave talk to that, and I might as well give it to you right.
Yes, we still have the ability to talk conditional use with them. So in any zone, you have permitted uses, which have certain parameters and certain rules that are pre-established. And then there's also conditional uses, which in some ways is a little bit of a misnomer. They are approved uses within the zone. You can't deny them the ability to do that within the zone, but the city does have the ability to establish certain conditions that they have to follow to do that use in the zone. Specifically with conditional use in commercial overlay zone, as it is written, daycare is a conditional use. So we would be able to put conditions on establishing a daycare in that area, in that zone, and what that would look like. We can't just arbitrarily or capriciously pick onerous things that might stop the development, but we can put conditions that do make sense to make sure, like the mayor said, that the health, safety, welfare of those that are there or the surrounding community, the community at large, receives that benefit. So yes, we still have conversation. We still have lots of conversation about the lofts. The only thing that is a done deal, so to speak, is the fact that they are vested in the zoning as it was written. So we still have a long way to go on the lofts. I will take responsibility for kind of that messaging, that idea we can't do anything. I think the question originally was, can we stop it? Well, no, we can't stop it. And so that messaging, I think, trumped the idea of we have to wait to have the specific conditional use discussion, the specific, are they meeting all of the zoning requirements? That has to take place at the next stage of the development process. And that's when they submit preliminary plans. So we're not just sitting here waiting for preliminary plans and just twiddling our thumbs. We have a list of items. Some of them are the exact same as your list of items that we are going to look at very, very specifically, double, triple check. We want to make sure that although we found ourselves pitted in a corner, and I think the city feels like that as well, you don't really know what a new zone is going to give you until you get a proposal, and in this case we realized that's not exactly what we were bargaining for. And I think you're expressing that, the city's expressing that. We've realized that from just strictly a development process standpoint. There are things that we've learned in this process specifically that I think we would have learned either way, but absolutely because of the community involvement and the comments, we've learned some lessons either quicker or better because of that.
I have a question regarding the lofts. So in regards to the lofts, I understand that there is a development agreement in place and that there are specific design standards required for those lofts, mainly the percentage of commercial versus livable space. And is there a strict timeline on that proposal where if they do not meet that deadline, that they cannot pursue any further, that they would have to resubmit a new proposal?
Okay, did everyone, we think we were able to hear that question clearly? Okay, because I don't know if I can repeat it. Thank you, Stephanie.
Yes, the development agreement is a 7-year agreement, so if it doesn't happen within that time, then that's null and void. So
So we just have to be really loud for 7 years.
7 years, right?
Well, they requested initially more than that, and that was brought down. They requested 10 years. I think we've seen with a recession and other things that timeline for development can get delayed, and so they requested a long timeline. We did bring that down. 7 years still feels like a long time at this stage. One of the things that is in the development agreement that was discussed in the council meeting when that was approved was the idea that running with the land or running with a developer, and so that's something looking back that we probably wish was a little bit of a different decision. But if this developer were to walk away for some reason, then yes, we would have some additional options at that point. The whole idea of them being vested in the zoning is kind of where we're handcuffed in some ways, and so for for them to not be vested in the zoning, certain things would have to take place and over quite a timeline. But it is a possibility, right? Again, we're going back to this idea of we can't stop the development necessarily, but we can do a lot of things to shape the development at this point, and that really is dependent on when they submit the preliminary site plan. So like I said, we're waiting for those. The last I talked to the developer, I've only had a couple of informal conversations with them since the last public meeting that they were at. And they said, we think we'll have them within a couple of weeks. Our intention is, as soon as we get those, we'll publish those. This is one of those kind of lessons learned, I think, for us as city staff, that typically in the development process, plans, once they get to preliminary site plan and they go before the planning commission, that's when that becomes public. And in this case, I think the lesson is learned. We can do that public process much earlier, and I think that would be valuable for any future development.
Quick question, 7-year clock starts running from when? From 2017?
I believe it was when the
Time when the agreement was.
yeah, I believe it was when the agreement.
Alright, Joe, you have something to add?
Oh, I just wanted to address the blight idea. I mean, we don't know exactly what's going in there, and so I can't say it's not going to become, a blighted property or not. But these condos or whatever they are, we haven't seen yet, but they are for medium to high income type residents. And I know sometimes we equate low income with communities that become run down. And so, but the thing about South Weaver is, I've just noticed that it's attracted the best people. This city attracts the best people to it, and so I think with our community the way it is, we can do our best to make this a good thing for our community.
Okay, do we have any other questions from the audience? I have a question, but I'll wait.
There's just 2 questions coming in from these.
Okay, great.
So one of them is, what is the required detention basin size and code for this property, and where can it be found?
You have to answer that.
I'm actually
Retention
no
basin.
expert on the detention basin. And I believe in their original concept plan, and if I remember correctly, they talked about an underground detention basin. That's something that Brandon Jones, as our city engineer, would be looking at specifically on the details on that type of thing. But those are the types of things that are on the list, right? As we talk about this list of items, we've heard about the concern of where's the snow going to go, or paint the curb red so that there's not off-street parking or on-street parking. There's a long list of those types of things. The visual of turning off of Deer Drive and making sure sight lines. There are elements of that's already addressed in the code. There are elements that aren't necessarily addressed in the code, and hopefully that's where the conditional use comes in, where if it really is an issue, and we feel that would be a bad thing for life safety or whatever other elements or concerns that we have, that's where we can put some stipulations and requirements as a conditional use. So, okay, you're allowed to do that as long as you ABC. So, again, we've heard a number of the concerns that the community has. If additional concerns come up in the process, let us know, right? We're looking at the same things I think you're looking at, but I do not propose, or I do not expect that every good idea is going to come out of my head. And if we're dependent on the ideas that are just in my head, I think we're in a lot of trouble. So I hope that you feel like I'm accessible, that you can send an email to me, or I'm sure if you go through Corinne, it'll eventually get to me as well. But
We try, we really try.
But you can always come to me directly and
David,
and
on
send
that
an
same
email to
note,
me.
the next question is, will it compromise the integrity of the canal, and has the water district weighed in at all at this point?
The canal company hasn't necessarily weighed in yet. The integrity of the canal is a really good point. That's the type of thing that we want to include in this list.
One other question that came in was, whose idea was the commercial overlay, and when was it adopted?
history of that.
It was 14.
Yeah.
Was it 2014 that commercial overlay was put in
2014
place?
was commercial overlay was added into the general plan, and
Want to repeat that for those that can't hear Paul?
So Paul is saying that 2014 is when that was
is
put
when
in
the
place in the
C-0
general
was
plan.
put into the city code.
We can look, if you go into the city code online, you look at the C-0 ordinance, and it has the date that shows when that was implemented or amended as the most recent change, so
Because
we can verify that.
that was for meeting minutes.
Okay, yeah. So, to that point, when I first started, the night that I was appointed last May, so not May 2019, but May 2018, the city council and the planning commission and some staff went on a field trip to look at this mixed use concept. They looked at different projects throughout the county and surrounding areas, and so I don't know when.
Business on the
Business
bottom.
on the bottom, residential on the top, and it never really carried through past that point, but the feedback I hear from that was a recognition that there are certain areas where that makes sense and there are certain areas where it does not make sense. And, you know, a historical downtown or an urban areas where that might make sense. But unfortunately, we weren't fast enough to change that. And so I don't know exactly when. We can look at that when commercial overlay came into existence on the books. The vision, I think, at one point was that would make sense. But again, now that you see even one proposal under that type of a zoning law, and you go, no, wait a minute. So, yeah, we can look at that timeline, but it sounds like 2014.
David, one question, please. Could you?
We've got time on this question, so do you want to ask it at the end, Paul?
All right.
That'd be great. Thanks. Okay. Thank you for your answers on that. I think that was great that we got feedback from Facebook. So thank you for posting your questions on Facebook so that we can get answers directly here live from the horse's mouth. That is the best type of information to get. the horse and the pony, or you know, whatever. All right. All right. So here we are moving on to our second question. So this question says, Canyon Meadows' initial investment was $1.5 million, and the city currently has itemized improvements of 3 future phases totaling an additional $3.15 million to be spent on the Canyon Meadows. Sources we received from the city manager, they're directly from the website, it's public record. While the greatest percentage of citizens currently live in the central and east side of the city, the majority of the other parks are grass-only detention basin parks, or several are old and dilapidated and in need of significant improvements. So why has the city budgeted items putting such a huge percentage into one single park, even though impact fees may have already been used?
I'll talk about it for just a second, and then I'll turn it over to you. Our parks have been a concern to all of us because ever since I got on council, there were so many things I realized that, you know, necessities. I mean, parks are important and it's good for the health of our citizens, but the necessities were so strong that we had to concentrate on trying to get caught up and plan for the future, get things in order. Canyon Meadows was actually property donated to the city, correct, by the Peterson family, and it was a huge piece of land. And so I think that the intent when this was acquired was that this can be like a gathering place for our community because it's so big and we can put so much there that so many people will be able to use it. And I think that was kind of the idea with that plan. We don't have the money budgeted for that right now. We've got impact fees, and that's pretty much all we have earmarked for parks. But we would like to see that park. You know, it's surrounded by a community that would love to use those amenities, and there's just a lot of fields and weeds there that we would really love to see it improved and have it be kind of a gathering place for the entire community, even though it might not be in the center of our community.
Yeah, you brought up the idea of impact fees. I think the question about the budget, we don't have a budget of 3.15 million for Canyon Meadows Park. That plan and that phasing and that itemization was kind of the list of what they would like to do, and that plan was put together in 2013. But we don't have money sitting there to do that. We haven't budgeted money to do that. It was a recognition that that's how much it would take at that time to do those improvements. I think everybody knows that we're a little bit on hold in terms of planning with Canyon Meadows Park because of the Army Corps of Engineers telling us that there were wetlands in the area after the fact. And so we've been working with the Army Corps to establish and understand exactly where they're telling us wetlands existed and need to be restored. We discussed what's called mitigation of wetlands, where you put wetlands in another location so that you can just fill and do whatever you want in the first location. And they told us it's not really an option in this case. We were pretty much told you can restore in place. We sent over. There's a long story with the wetlands, and it gets longer when you work with the Army Corps. But basically, we recognize at this point that as soon as we can finalize where the wetlands are or were and need to be again, then we will know exactly the area that we have to be able to improve Canyon Meadows Park. That was the whole intent last summer when we approached the Army Corps. Was we had heard that there are wetlands in the area. They weren't delineated, which is a specific term of designation of where the outline of the wetlands are. There's history there where apparently there were some wetlands delineated at one point, but that information was not readily known. And when we looked into it, it wasn't there for us to see. And so basically once the Army Corps said, there absolutely were wetlands there, here's the evidence, here's what we've got, we said we've got conflicting information that there aren't wetlands there. We even had a letter signed by the Army Corps for one of the subdivisions there that says there's no wetlands right here. And we said, well, did you have this letter? And they said, oh, that must be a mistake. And they gave us some information they had and said that's the first we've seen that. So long story short, we know that as soon as we can establish where those wetlands are, then we can work to satisfy the Army Corps' requirements, and then we will know exactly what land we have available in Canyon Meadows, and we'll have to redo that phasing plan and that re-itemization list, and we'll have to see again, well, what really would it cost, and redesign essentially what the rest of that park could be in today's terms.
There's a question, when the developer brings in a park and it comes in on impact fees, what is the percentage of the budget that will be needed to maintain these additional parks coming in? Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a great question. The idea is if you're donated a park or any type of infrastructure from a developer, then the city has the ongoing cost to maintain it. That's the process for every type of infrastructure the city has, for water lines, sewer lines, even curb and gutter, the streets. All of that is put in and paid for by the developer, but then the city takes ownership of it through a conditional acceptance and then a final acceptance process. So in the case of the park here, the question surrounding impact fees, I keep hearing that word, so let me clarify. The idea is that right now, today, we have a certain level of service in our parks. We have a certain number of park acres that serves this community. Whether or not that's the right amount or there's a deficiency in how many parks, right, that's a different discussion, but we have a current number of park space for the current residents. When new residents come in, to maintain the exact same ratio or exact same level of service, the new developer has to pay for their impact on the system. So their impact fees that are associated with the new parks that we will have to build to service those new residents, so it's the same level of service of our current residents. That's how impact fees are established throughout all of the different services that we have. It's the impact that the new residents have on our current system. And so the state regulates impact fees very, very heavily. They are specifically regulated to the point where you can only use impact fees for whatever infrastructure for that infrastructure, but not just infrastructure, for new infrastructure. You can't take development impact fees from new development that are impacting the system and use it for maintenance on your existing system. So we right now have about $400,000 in park impact fees that has to be spent to build new parks. And you have to use it within 6 years of when you collected it. So we've got a rolling list of when we collected impact fees from new developers and when we have to spend that money, again, on new parks in this case. So when we talk about the next phase of Canyon Meadows Park, and what money is budgeted for that, so we've got this itemized list of 3.15. We don't have that amount of money, but we do have about $400,000 of park impact fees that has to be spent in a time window. So the next thing that we do with Canyon Meadows Park, or any new park, would be using those impact fees. So it's that when we talk about developers and development paying their fair share, so to speak, a lot of that is referencing the process of developing impact fees. And cities are regulated on how they calculate impact fees, and studies have to be done. It starts with what's called, well, obviously the general plan is the beginning stage of that, but then you get into capital facilities plans that identify projects or other infrastructure needs, and that translates into an impact fee facility plan. Which of those capital facilities or projects are specific to the impact and the new development, the new residents, not the current residents. And then that translates into an impact fee analysis, which is the cap of what a city can charge for that particular impact fee.
Wow, that is a very helpful analysis. That is a lot of information, but I think really helpful. Do we have any other questions? We'll go back to Mayor Joe on this.
Just one comment. I believe trails are part of
It
that
is,
as well.
yeah, trails as well.
Trails is part of that as well, and trails was at the top of the survey that we sent out last year to residents, and we are working so hard on trails. And I made a video. Dave's gonna look over it before I send it out, but hopefully you can see what we've been doing to try and get trails in this city, so.
Our next question was, what are our possibilities? So that sounds like that came in at a terrific time.
Perfect time. Excellent. Are there any other questions from the room regarding parks and park fees, park development, impact fees?
I just have an idea. Is this an area with our old parks that a community organization could band together to perhaps fix the parks, do something with the parks, you know?
Do you mean
Like our,
equipment? With
well,
putting
just
equipment
somehow
or-
come together and come up with ideas, maybe get the neighborhoods to know the city doesn't have the money, so they're not gonna be fixed anytime soon. But what's something we can do as a community to band together to maybe make a change?
Sherry Farms Park would be great to have a trail there. There's a
That would be
Bowery at Central Park for South Weber Days. We go to South Weber
Yes.
Days, have this huge festival, and that
Yes,
Bowery
we've talked about that. We have talked about that as well, and yes, anytime the community can get involved. In fact, Kaysville City, there's a lady there that loves pickleball, and she has raised hundreds of thousands of dollars to build pickleball courts in Kaysville. And so, yeah, anytime a community can get together to help to fix things up like that, it's a wonderful thing and a good thing for the community.
Does it always come back to pickleball?
It always comes back to pickleball.
disc golf. Disc golf too. We have some disc golf fans.
Disc golf.
Disc golf fans in the room here tonight. And how are we on time for
We're
this
good.
question? We're good. Kathy.
Do we have, like, land for that, if somebody wanted to do a pickleball thing, or would we have to do it on the parks that are already there? Because the one by me is like a big retention pond, there's nothing that can go in it. I don't think,
Is it the one just east of you?
yeah.
And it doesn't
The
have,
sledding-
it doesn't
sledding
have
hill?
lawn.
Yeah, well, it's good for tubing.
He sled. The last sled.
It
Well, it'd probably have to go in an existing city facility, it would have to go on city property. So, unless you wanted to put it on your own and invite everyone in the community.
Mine's really big.
Okay, we have a question for Stephanie and then Joel.
I have a quick question about parks and grants. Have you looked into any community development grants, maybe something like a community block grant?
The CDBG funds.
Do you wanna talk about that one?
You can go ahead.
The easy answer is yes, there are grants available. You specifically mentioned community development block grant. That specific grant is dependent on an area being low income and to develop an area of the community that is low income. So we did just earlier this summer make sure we had a seat at the table when it comes to Davis County's CDBG, Community Development Block Grant program. Previously, we were the only city that was not involved. So we made sure we had a seat at the table. However, we'd have to be pretty specific in what type of area of the community we could do that specific grant. However, generally speaking, there are grants available, and we look at grants a lot. We recognize the need for funding sources outside of what we've already got, and the mayor put out a message just last spring about grants.
Yes, we received over $1 million in grants this last year.
Oh, that's
So,
wonderful.
We were working really hard to find money.
Excellent. Okay, do we have time for one more question?
We do.
Joel, you had a question.
It was just a quick question. We talked pretty strongly about having a dog park, and we know that's all gonna be on hold. We've got a lot of dog lovers around here. In the interim, what are we gonna do? Are we talking about cutting an ordinance, so maybe there's a park we could at least walk that dog through? What do you
Yes,
think?
so I can, yes, so just east of the posse grounds is 4 acres of land, well, roughly 4 acres of land that has been given to the city by Nelson Homes. And although we don't have the money to, do the improvements on this park, we have made part of our agreement with them that they would they're gonna put in a detention basin, they're gonna put grass in it, sprinklers and grass, and they're going to put a fence around it. And so that is what we're going to use for a dog park. They're also, because we want trails, we asked them to put a meandering trail around that 4 acres for citizens, so.
I just want to add, I don't mean to jump off of the questions and get off topic, but I'd like to tie an idea to what the mayor just said for maybe future consideration. When Nelson Homes did that development, they did what's called a planned unit development, a PUD, which is essentially a residential overlay on the existing zone structure underneath, which allowed them to have the homes a little bit closer together and provide a larger open space. But because it wasn't the underlying zoning and it was an overlay, it created a conversation between the city and the developer about, well, if you want to squeeze that in a little bit and have some more open space, then you need to do some things and make it a benefit to the community. So that's why we were able to negotiate the fencing, that they're gonna pay for that, for the trails, that they're gonna pay for that. And so I'm tying it to the other conversation in the future about a mixed use overlay, and that discussion is taking place. That's coming before the city council on September 24th to have a discussion about what that may or may not look like. But that's one of the benefits of an overlay, is that because it's not underlying zone, it creates discussion ability and negotiation between the developer and the city. So in that case, with that planned unit development on top of the residential zoning, we were able to get some of those things in that park and make that better.
It's really nice if we could figure it out right, to have that flexibility, to be able to do things to help our community as a whole in a situation like that.
Wonderful. We're done.
We're good on time. All right, thank you. If you have questions, you can ask them at the end. So, all right. Okay, we're moving on to our third question. All right, Even though South Bench Drive was not formally adopted to the general plan by the public, the city has already begun financial investments for it, including buying property, diverting traffic to it with a median on 475, and starting on phase 1. In light of the 99.9% tax increase to address the desperate need our city has for improvements to our current infrastructure and our safety, why are you spending taxpayer dollars speculating on future development in our city by funding a road the public has never approved? Second half, if the public opposes this road in its phases, what will be done?
Okay, I'm gonna start and then you can fill in any holes.
Kind of got a pattern now.
So, I wanna make it clear that phase 1 of South Bench Drive is the portion that we are working on right now. Phase 1, even though it was called Old Fort Road in the last general plan, is still the same alignment. It's still the same alignment that was approved with the last general plan. That's, yes, 2014. That is the only portion that we are working on. There is no other official alignment along any of that South Bench Drive. And so, so that's the answer to that question. We're not putting in money to something that has not been approved. Now, that is why in your survey and with the general plan, we're asking for your input on South Bench Drive. And let me explain why we feel this is a better alignment. It used to go, Old Fort Road used to go up through a residential community, houses would be facing it, it went up by the school. It was a lot more invasive to our citizens. And when our engineers did a transportation study, Horrocks Engineering, along with Brandon, they decided that this would be a better alignment because it goes through undeveloped areas and we can control that development and make sure that the houses are turned away from that road so it's not as invasive on those citizens to put that in. This road, we have around 7,300 citizens right now. If we still have a ton of property that people have the right to sell and to build on, even if we had just single-family homes in all the places that people could sell and build on, we would end up with 12,000 to 13,000 residents in this community. Well, we can navigate through the city really well right now with our transportation system, can't we? But what happens when our population almost doubles, at the very least, almost doubles? All of a sudden our service, our road service is going to become insufficient. There'll be wait times trying to get out of the city. There's basically 2 egresses. Trying to get out of our city, you're gonna add 15 to 20 minutes to your commute, possibly, by the time we're built out. And so this is something that the city has planned and looked to and said, we've got to address this, and this is our attempt to do that with South Bench Drive. And this is the best thing that we've found so far to be able to address those concerns with the future. So.
I think you're passionate about that one.
Good.
All that I need to add, or all that I feel I can add to this, is a conversation that second idea about, well, what if everybody opposes this? As the mayor said, the initial portion that's being built and constructed right now today has always been part of that plan. In 2014, it was part of the plan. There were 2 alignments presented essentially with this idea. No, let me take a step back. South Bench Drive, I think, addresses a couple of different problems that the city is facing in the future. Maybe not right now today, but in the future. And as we try to plan for that and manage that, and put pieces in place now that make sure development happens in a way that still protects the integrity of the neighborhoods and the residents. One is this idea of getting up the hill, right? Connecting to Layton. And that was talked about within days of me starting in the city. And that idea I think some of that became more acute after the fire 2 years ago, but clearly that discussion was happening long before that. If it was on the general plan in 2014 about this connection with Layton. So the hillside is one issue, one element of South Bench Drive, and the only reason the alignment that was on 2014 and the alignment up the hill for South Bench Drive is the same alignment. The South Bench Drive portion down in the valley area is where it's different than that Old Fort Road alignment. In the general plan in 2014, the 1900 East dirt road up the hill, paving that or doing something there, as well as this Old Fort Road alignment that eventually wound its way up the hill, were the two proposals, essentially, the two ideas in that general plan. The concept was to connect with Layton, for various reasons, and maybe that's a discussion for another day. But the hillside alignment was simply put on there because the question was, what is an alignment that would be under an 8% grade? And the line that's on the map today that you see and was on the map in 2014 was simply put because it was under the 8% grade. It had no other reasoning besides that. So there were studies done, there wasn't any feasibility looked at, it was simply identifying the connection to Layton, and it showed the percent grade. So that's all that alignment ever did. So then in in the interim between 2014 and now, as we're updating the general plan, the issues with 1900 East and going right through a residential neighborhood and turning that into a collector more than it already is, as well as having Old Fort Road, like the mayor said, go through neighborhoods and eventually connect and go up the hill. That wasn't all that great of an idea. At least there are legitimate and obvious issues with both of those alignments. And so, under the assumption that you are getting up the hill, the question was, what's a better alignment in the valley area to make that work? And so, from a planning perspective, the idea of starting with the assumption that there will be homes down in that area eventually, that's large farmland. Whether that's soon or whether that's way far away is somewhat irrelevant to the planning idea. The planning idea is, if it is homes at some point, how do you manage traffic through it? And the concept of having a road that doesn't have homes front on it means that the traffic is channeled and the residential neighborhoods are protected. And so that was the concept of changing that alignment so it didn't go through Old Fort Road and connected what was on the plan up the hill with a different alignment in the valley. But you'll notice that it says on the plan, the current out for the public, everybody to look at, general plan update and the transportation map, it says proposed. You're right, that alignment of South Bench Drive down in the valley wasn't in the general plan in 2014. It was a proposed alignment that came later. So I think there's a little bit of confusion, at least from my perspective, about, well, we're already building something that goes up the hill. And we're just building the portion that was already on the plan and approved. And the reason we're doing it now is because when developers come, when landowners come and say, I want to build, then the city's role is to make sure that that's done properly and done well. And so that Old Fort Road alignment, right off of 475 that turned, that was always part of the plan, and so that's the part that's being built. The idea when the South Bench Drive alignment was discussed was, well, let's have that conversation with the public during the next general plan update. It was always this kind of proposed idea with lots of questions surrounding it. And so we're now to that point, and that's why I think the questions are still coming and we're ready to have that conversation.
I'm sure we have a lot of questions on this, so.
Keep talking about South Bench Drive.
Yeah,
Sorry.
We do, I'm gonna kind of summarize them into two.
Great.
Hopefully the listeners are okay with that. Basically, point blank, if we are highly opposed to this, will you listen and will it be
not sure about it becoming a state road. Of course, we're gonna listen to the concerns of the residents, and, you know, there's a lot of factors that go into a decision. There are differing opinions of the residents, there's also other factors that we have to take into consideration, you know, like safety, like again, transportation, being able to function properly, build out. I mean, there's a lot of different factors that we also have to weigh along with our citizens' concerns and opinions. So, did you want to say more on that? As far as a state road, I mean, I have no idea.
We have talked to the state about the potential idea. I think you know that UDOT has put that on their regional plan and all of those things, that same concept. And we have hinted that they should take it plenty of times in those conversations, and they haven't necessarily liked that idea. But I think that's a future conversation. There's still so many steps before ever seeing a hill or a road ever get up the hill. So the conversation about South Bench Drive in the valley and where the development will take place is very, very different than the conversation about getting up the hill or connecting with Layton. If this is just me speaking, and I'm not the mayor, I'm not the city council, I just do what they tell me to do. But if it gets to the point where we get studies done or we find out, you know, dead set, there is no way that hillside would ever work, then I could see South Bench Drive coming and collecting up to South Weaver Drive, and then being a very different road from that point on, in the neighborhoods and other land down there on the south side of the community, south of South Weaver Drive. There's still just so many.
Hey, don't forget.
Yeah, there's still just so many unknowns with South Bench Drive up the hill, and so I think there's lots of questions about South Bench Drive, and the hillside questions are still very, very much unknown. The alignment is unknown. The feasibility is unknown. The dollars are unknown. There's just so much unknown. Really, there's a concept out there of connecting with Layton as a need, and that's really what the general plan and the transportation map addresses, is the potential connection. The discussion with South Bench Drive down in the valley is development driven. It's when landowners want to, or if or when they sell and want to build. And we have a plan in place to get traffic through that area, hopefully in a way that protects those neighborhoods.
We have a few questions, so.
Sorry, has it been looked at putting, I know this is crazy, I'm just thinking out loud, but has it ever been looked at making another exit off of 84 and putting more of a major road on that goes, because I mean the closer you go west, the closer South Weaver Drive gets to the freeway, so you could just scant up that hillside and make that more of a major road up to Layton. And I mean I get that you have to plan for roads in places that aren't developed and how is it gonna look and stuff, but it seems to me if that road does connect up into Layton, that it's going to be used by more than just South Weaver citizens. It's going to be more of a major thoroughway for people who work up in Layton, like from Riverdale to Layton or wherever, you know. So it seems like that would be a really high traffic road. So, like, in my mind, I'm envisioning like the Draper exit that's, is it 146? How it kind of goes right up that mountainside, and there's a bunch of residential things, and it goes up and over. But anyways, has that ever been talked about or doing, or?
So the question is, has there ever been a discussion or a conversation about if the need is to get up to Layton, and the idea is having traffic outside of the community going through the community to get to Layton, then not having a road that connects that actually go through the heart of the city, have it go farther to the west.
Yeah, that was just me thinking out loud.
I don't know if that's been looked at necessarily. I know that it's a steep hillside, right? And trying to do it straight would be difficult and things like that. But it's really it's all speculation at this point of what could be done. I think if our goal is to have people outside of the community come through the community, then we probably look at it differently than maybe we're looking at it now. I think right now, the discussion has been how do we have additional traffic but maintain the residential feel, if that makes sense. And the idea of channeling and not having homes front it, not putting a road that, I don't know, could potentially be 30 miles, 35 miles an hour, that's yet to be determined.
But don't homes, I mean, as it gets closer to South River Drive, don't homes, like, front that intersection? I mean, where, like, there's talks of it being commercial.
Yeah, there's a couple.
There's
It's just
a
the least
couple.
invasive route that we've found to be able to, there are a few homes that, they won't front it, well, they front South Weaver Drive.
Right.
That's what you're talking about, right? That intersection
Mm-hmm.
where South Bench goes through South Weaver Drive. Yeah, there will be a couple of homes right there on that corner, on that intersection, so,
Like those two old craftsman homes
yes.
right there.
Yeah.
There's also not very many spots along South Weaver Drive where a road could intersect. Because of how it curves and things like that, there are sightline issues and other things. So there's really only one place that a South Bench Drive, as it currently goes through that undeveloped land, would be able to come up the hill to South Weaver Drive, if that makes sense. There just aren't very many spots. But the idea of, if we want people to be coming from Ogden off of 475 and then getting up the hill to the west, I don't know if that's necessarily been looked at or vetted very far.
Okay, how are we on? We can probably take one more question.
One more question. Oh. Don't put me in that position. One more question. Landy.
I think Maddie has.
Landy had his hand up. Oh, you win, Landy. You had your hand up first. All right.
Excellent. So you guys have both discussed potential items for the roads being built out. One for the community and to address growth needs, and potentially ingress, egress out of the city in other ways. But there's also been studies and comments also about what would it look like as a thoroughfare, and how many cars would be. If we ever had a road up the hill, which we do, 1900 East could connect to Layton with it. I mean, that's a separate road from South Bench. Do we have the ability to control and say, we do not want this road to connect to a east gate of Hillfield, because we do not want the higher traffic? We don't want a thoroughfare through the city. We want this to be an ingress, egress, and for the citizens, for our community.
Road for us.
Do you want to take that?
I passed the mic.
I'll say something. I got a thought.
Okay.
A thought.
I think it's very difficult to control who drives on the road.
Sure.
But the idea
But
of
the
maybe
plan-
a toll road or something
The
like
future
that
plan
would leave the.
shows that connecting maybe to Hillfield. Can
Sure.
we work with Layton? How much say do we get with Layton to say, we want this to come out on Church Street near the Maverick? The
Rather
1900,
than
rather than
As a residential.
as a residential. Right.
That's a good question. We have talked with Layton about the connection, right? And where that may or may not be. We don't really get to tell them what their road network looks like. They've talked about having Church Street and Fairfield eventually kind of loop and connect in some form or fashion. Again, for them, it's very future discussion as well. So the idea of our road eventually getting up there and either turning into Church Street, I think that's a potential, or turning into Fairfield, I think that's a potential. That hasn't necessarily been finalized. Yeah.
All right, are we good on time there? Or do we
This
have?
one's getting the most questions. I don't know if we want to give it a little more time, or if you want to move on.
Yeah, if we have a lot of questions from Facebook, let's go ahead and answer some of those and a few more from the room.
I think one of the biggest questions right now is to talk about the median on 425. Why push it one way? 475. Why push it one way? Why push it?
Why are we pushing traffic down Old Fort
that
Road
way?
now?
Before it's finished.
Before it's finished, where it'll end up we're pushing traffic into a residential, what will be a residential neighborhood right now. Great question. Can we not do that for the 4
more people
Pushing
on
it
a
to a dead end.
Nelson Home subdivision that are gonna have the whole city turning around in their.
There you go.
Yeah, it's
Make a
going
big
straight to
U-turn
that.
sign.
Yeah, the
Don't
dog
do
park
that.
is really the
And then the dog park.
biggest feature.
Well, it's very obvious that that road goes and where the current construction would end, it dead ends right to a field, right? There is a turn there to get into a subdivision, but ultimately, yeah, the road as it's designed will stop after phase one until development occurs. Some of that, the idea of the median, and what has been affectionately referred to as the sweeping T. So if you're coming off of 475.
Thank you. I read the newsletter and I went, sweeping tea.
Yeah, the idea of coming off 475, let's say you're going south, and it sweeps around, right? It bends around, and 475 comes up, and if you look at the plan, it has this slight jog which connects and tees into South Bench Drive. But the island that creates that T was designed in a way so that you have what's called a free right. So let's say you're coming off of 475, or coming off of I-84, and you want to go straight down 475. You do that. It's a free right. The island creates that option, that you can just drive straight down 475. If you're coming up 475, and you want to get onto I-84, the only change is that you now have that short jog, and then an intersection with probably not a lot of traffic coming from the east right now, because like you said, it's a dead end. So it's this little jog and a pause, and then I hope a complete stop, and then you turn left to go and continue up to I-84. So it doesn't change dramatically going north or south at this point. However, the idea of once South Bench Drive is fully improved all the way to South Weber Drive, then the idea is that it would alleviate the traffic on 475 that has the residential feel to it and has homes fronting onto it. That if you're coming from the east end of town and you want to get onto I-84, that would be a better option that doesn't go right in front of driveways and things, if that makes sense.
Couldn't that be done right now by putting the road structure the way you want it designed, and yet not forcing a left turn for the normal traffic that's already flowing right now? Because the median now makes it a permanent feature. I mean, we're not talking even a painted one, we're talking about a large cement median that now is forcing a left turn on a road where if we're trying to get traffic out of the city in a clean, easy pattern, we've now really disrupted that on that road. Yes, it makes it easy to come off the freeway into the town,
Sure.
but leaving is now more hindered.
Yeah, to what degree is probably a little bit unknown, right? How much of an inconvenience that is to make that slight jog and turn left. Is it? Yes, I think that it is slightly. How much? I'm not sure. That's a good question. The conversation of whether or not we do something differently, there's probably some space for that type of a conversation. If there are ideas, there's probably space for that kind of thing.
Once the population has moved in there, then the median can be installed right in the.
I think the median right now creates the free right. I mean, you could.
Don't we already have a?
Yeah, we already
I
have a
already have it, we can already go straight.
Right.
Why don't you just very
Why don't you
confusing.
just do the line instead of put the cement or whatever, the medium you're putting in?
What would it matter if you still have to be the lines versus cement? It wouldn't make a
What
difference.
Cement.
So this is are there any other follow-up
There-
questions on the median?
There's a lot of questions, maybe I would encourage you guys to go through it, I mean,
Okay.
they're almost going faster. There are a couple that maybe I think have been warranted or been asked many times, so maybe there's questions on the previous studies done by the slope, it's already been determined it's unstable. So there was a question of why isn't that being addressed now? And another question of will future studies of the slope and the safety of building on that fall on us as taxpayers to pay for?
As far as studies done on the slope, if I understand correctly, I think that's a study or a report on when there was the slide. Are there more than just that study that is being referred to in that?
Yes.
Okay, there's more than just that one. I'd love to see whatever information is out there about it before we put any
Jackie
money
Layton?
into
You need
a.
to talk to Jackie Layton, right, on that one?
Did she send an email to you?
She sent an email.
She sent an email to you guys about all the studies on the
She
slope.
presented it in the city
Excellent.
council
I know
as well.
that
She came to the city council,
She
yeah.
talked about the groundwater
She
contamination.
talked about that and also, I think a previous study as well.
To me, just thinking about, okay, let's assume that we really want that road up there, up the hillside. What are the steps before that would ever happen? And gathering information about the hillside is the first one.
But we have that
And-
information, why would we pay for it again? Sorry, I'm interrupting.
Sure, the question,
I'm breaking my
the
own
question
moderator
is,
rules,
we
you
have
guys.
information, why would we pay for it again?
Mhm.
And I'm saying, we want to gather all the information first before paying for any new information.
All right.
When I
Yes.
say is the study about and the report about the slide, that was a very isolated and specific incident. It doesn't tell us about the whole hillside. So there's more information needed than what has already been produced. But before we pay for anything, we want to analyze and review anything that already has been produced.
So, but the studies, future studies on that slope for this road will come on to taxpayers.
Taxpayer dollars.
Is that great?
Not necessarily, because we're looking into new infrastructure, and it ties back to the idea of impact. That we have a current level of service, and if we're maintaining that level of service, the question is, do we need the road or do we not need the road? But if we don't need the road, and it's a matter of we're planning for future growth, then impact fees could be part of that equation.
There is a lot of comments coming in, so I would recommend.
Natalie's had her hand up since the
Yeah,
beginning, I don't think she's
Natalie?
introduced like, so.
I want to start out with a statement for saying, I think you're misguided if you think that the area of South Weaver wants traffic. You're saying, I think we're wanting traffic for maybe the commercials and things like that. I would say that most people don't want additional traffic coming from Ogden to Layton to Ogden. The other thing that I think that you should think about, I am from the West End, and the new proposed road goes through my family's farm, it goes through our friend's farm, it goes through all of those places. And then the reason that they haven't done anything yet is because they hold those places dear to them. They don't want it developed, they don't want anything to happen. And if it were to happen in the future, now they have a 3-lane highway that's going to be taking up that land that they could use for it. So I think Angie's idea is a great idea. I looked at the studies today, we're at $143 million for a road that I could bet nobody really wants. I got a lot of comments saying we've got 84, we've got 89. We do one more exit off the west side, I don't think we need anything else, because all we're doing now is causing so many problems. I know all the people in the west are sad about it, the people in the east, the people on the south. I think we're causing a lot of problems that could be totally avoided. We don't want additional traffic. We don't want a 3-lane highway. We don't want a stoplight. Where they have a stoplight is on the middle of a blind corner. I live there. It's a blind corner. So I'm thinking there's got to be a better solution than all this time and money. And you just said, oh, in the future, you know, as a scare tactic, I think the fire came, it's an isolated incident and everyone got out perfectly fine. I don't think we need scare tactics like that saying we need to get out of there. I know that everyone down by me is so upset about what's shown on the map today, how it is going to affect for generations. It's places that they love. Most of these families there, they settled there, they love it there, and they kept it that way because they love it. So I know we talk about how scary it is on the south side of things. It's equally as scary as the people that you're discarding in the valley.
Thank you, Natalie. On Facebook,
And it does get, and I think it really does get to the heart of, we haven't had an opportunity as a community to this point to have a discussion on, do we want a connection to Layton? And do we want a 3-lane highway well, maybe not a highway, it is called a minor arterial, if I'm correct, a minor arterial that's 3 lanes wide. At Old Fort Road, this will be a 50-foot wide road. In some areas that can be shortened to a 36-foot road, but it can remain a 50-foot wide road. Is that something that as citizens in South Weaver we want, because that will invite the traffic? So that is a discussion maybe we can have, and we can have that discussion sometime and discuss what a connection to land really means. Are we ready to move on?
Yeah, I think you're okay.
All right. Oh, unless, I mean,
Yes,
yes, go ahead. Yeah,
because there's so many questions on South Bench Drive. I think it would be a good idea to maybe create a spot on the website for them to ask their questions, and we could give them the answers on there. I think that would be a good idea. I think that, okay.
It sounds to me like this is something that we absolutely need to discuss now.
Absolutely, that would be great. Kind of like we've done for the lofts.
Let's get the action plan in place.
Specific to South Bench Drive?
Yeah.
Specific questions to South Bench Drive are sent to
Sure, send them to me.
David Larsen. All right. Okay. And if I'm smart enough, that's dlarsen@southweavercity.com. All right.
She's used that before.
All right, so here's our last question, and I think too that the discussion of South Bench Drive ties into this question a little bit as well. So it kind of is a good tie into this final question. So water increase, transportation fee, 99.9% tax increase, the soccer complex, the lofts, raise HDH rezone, which has remained suggested as ADH, South Bench Drive. So far the public has pushed back on every one of these issues, and our elected representatives and their appointees have ignored us every time. What is the most effective way for us as citizens to get our voice heard, ensure the city government is working toward its citizens' goals, and making decisions based on citizens' wants and needs without having a citizens watchdog group? How can we implement citizens groups who would be able to represent their immediate neighborhood during meetings?
I know Dave and I talked about this earlier, and maybe he wants to address it, but like he said, a watchdog group is a good thing. I mean, it's helped us to look at things more closely and carefully, and improved our city, so, and improved how we do things. So it's not a bad thing. I mean, who gets to fraternize with such awesome citizens? I mean, as we have here tonight. Without going into each of these issues individually, which is it's hard to address them all at once. I was just thinking of the transportation fee. We did a capital facilities study on our infrastructure, our roads, and they only have a service life, a small remaining service life, and no plans in place in order to maintain those or to extend the life of those roads. And it's so much easier and so much less money to maintain those roads than it is to tear them out and build a new road. And so, we had to put a plan in place so that all our funds were going to the roads themselves, without bonding or whatever we had to do when our roads failed and we didn't have a plan to fix them. And so, that is that particular one. I'm trying to remember what else there was.
Complex, the HDH on raised.
Oh, okay, the high density housing on raised property was not passed. It was not approved.
I think they're talking about it being zoned again.
Suggested again.
Okay.
General plan.
Yes, and that's why we're getting public input for that. The concern that was brought up is that the single resident homes would be fronting South Weaver Drive. There might be other things that can be done to accommodate those. It just seemed to make more sense to put maybe a townhome on there or something, but,
So I'm gonna let you off the hook, and we don't expect you to address every one of these issues tonight, because the central question that we're addressing is that all of these things have happened, and those citizens that have come to meetings and expressed things, and now we're still in the same position where we're feeling there's additional things still coming up, and we don't see evidence that we're being heard. How does that change? What does it look like when citizens are finally being heard in our city? What does that look like to you? To us, it's citizen groups. Is that a possibility? What does it look like to you when we are being heard?
well, you always have the option to create citizen groups. And I know sometimes it doesn't seem like we listen to citizens, but we do. We always take into account what citizens say, and but like I said before, there's other factors we have to consider too, like roads, and that's why I explained the road thing. You know, citizens didn't want they didn't want a fee, but our backs were against a wall. You know, financially, it would have been devastating had we not done anything to address that problem. And so there were a number of citizens that were upset with that. There were also a number of citizens that said, we support you in this, we understand, you know, this needs to be done. There are differing viewpoints, different opinions. We have to take all of those into consideration, as well as the safety and the functionality of our city. There are a lot of different factors, but, you know, even though you might not get everything exactly as you want it, there are things that are changed and differences that are made because of your viewpoints and because of the things that you tell us. We take these into consideration. We do what we can to try to help as many citizens as we possibly can. And that's, you know, that's the way a city has to work. So, do you want to say something to that?
To me, this is the heart of the entire conversation. And when I was looking at South Weber City as a potential landing place for me and having hopefully a long career here, one of the things that attracted me so much to this community, even though it's a quote unquote high growth area, that there's lots of building going on, the city knows what it wants and knows who it is. And I think some cities lose that when they are going through high growth, and it's troublesome, and they don't know who they are, and they don't have the plans in place. But when I looked at South Weber City, it's this beautiful, wonderful area, and you know what you want. You know who you are as a community, and that was part of what made me want to be here. And this idea about citizen input, of listening, to me, that is why I got into city government, frankly speaking. I worked in the private sector in a couple of different industries after getting out of school with my bachelor's degree, and then came across city government and local government, not just state or federal, but actual city service as a career, and fell in love, and I knew I needed to go back to school and do some things so that I could spend my time serving a community. And I said it before, and I've said this to our city staff plenty of times, but I really truly believe that if we're reliant upon the ideas that are in my head, we're in a lot of trouble, because we are all in this together, and this is our city. And I can't speak for the mayor or the city council, but I have watched every single one of them, especially over the last 6-8 weeks, when the public input has grown to the point that it is. Take every email and stew over every idea and listen. The second part of that is how do we prove it? How do we show that the city is listening? That's on us, right? That is on us to prove that your ideas are incorporated. You know, with the realization that there's this weighing that a council and a mayor has to go through. But I think everybody recognizes that there are differing opinions. Even with us sitting in this same group, that there are different ideas about the same concept or the same issue. But ultimately, to me, as I look back over the last 2 months specifically, and now having a group of citizens that not just care, but care to the point of action and care to the point of speaking. I think all citizens care, but that extra level of care to the point of speaking up, of coming to meetings, of taking time away from family, of doing all those things, that's what makes South Weber great. That's what makes this great. And for me, personally, in my role, I've tried to analyze and reanalyze where did the communication breakdown happen, and what needs to change moving forward so that we as a city are sharing information before the questions are asked, or having the conversation in this format or other formats, that it's more of a participative process. Participative. The city's always been open in what we do, but it's one thing to be open and then post something on the city website after the fact. And to me, that's, I think, what the request is. That's what I'm hearing loud and clear is, hey, Dave, as the city manager, when something takes place, let everybody know that it's taking place. When a discussion or an issue is coming up, let everybody know and invite and ask for that feedback during that process. And as I look back at the resources of the city and our website and our social media use and some of those tools that are readily available, I think there's space for improvement there. And so for me, the commitment is to do a better job of that. I hope that for the citizens that's a two-way street. And I think you're all experiencing it right now and feeling it right now, that when you are involved, whether that's as a unified group or a large group or whether that's individually coming to meetings, that level of participation is so important. And cities are begging for that around the state, and we're lucky enough to have it.
Great, we've got questions to add.
Joel, do you have something to add?
I think when we really look at the crux of the issue here, it is one of philosophy. And we've kind of mentioned it before in here that the citizens seem to have one philosophy of this is about how we want to grow in the stage we want to grow at it. And we're one of the few left remaining choice pieces of land in this area. There's nothing going up Ogden, there's nothing going up Layton. We're more wanted by developers in the outside world to develop their way. And the general plan itself, and I counted before I came here, I'm up to 62 of them now that I've read and really studied through. And there's a big difference in a lot of cities on actual, instead of just the communication, but the engagement. You're in the business, you've probably seen Murray City and Ogden City, and when they started their city general plan, they went into an immense amount of detail of actually engaging the people, bringing them into it, and they considered it part of the actual plan itself. Not just to collect a few comments later on, but to actually get the idea of what the people who are currently living here want. And at the beginning, in their introduction of every one of those general plans, it says the #1 goal is to #1, preserve the existing citizens' property and residence and value, and to preserve the way the city is today. And then as it goes down, it talks about the added development and everything. I think that right now we're at a unique point where the city and the general plan is working off of one direction, build roofs, build houses, build so that we can get more commercial, and yet the citizens are saying, let's do that at a much slower paced level, and instead of begging others to come in, we set the ground rules in that master plan that says, #1, if you're a residential area, the next thing that can come next to you is maybe a medium density. You can't have an issue where you've got residential homes and suddenly somebody puts a high density, high area. That should never happen. That should be in the general plan. And the citizens should be able to rely on you and that plan, once we've given that impact and those opinions, that you follow that.
Is it fair to say, Joel, that we have not had citizen input in terms of neighborhoods, communities, landowners, people that have a vested interest in the city that are speaking out now have not had the opportunity to give that input in citizens' councils and committees? Is that a fair statement? And that is something we want. Is that something that you can do right now for our general plan?
Well, I'm just thinking, maybe I'm off on the wrong track here, but that is the reason that we have public comment, you know, in every meeting, is so that citizens can bring up their concerns, their issues. We don't have resources necessarily to go in these in-depth studies, you know, when you talk about Ogden and things, they have more money, more resources to be able to do that more effectively, but that doesn't mean that we can't do everything that we can to try and get as much public involvement as we can. We moved our public comment to the beginning so you wouldn't have to sit through the entire meeting. You know, we're willing to sit as long as people are willing to stand and give their input, and so hopefully you feel like you can come to us. I hope that you felt that way. I know I've tried to address every email, every text, every phone call that has come to me, and I know the council members have as well, and so hopefully you're not feeling like we're just shutting you out, because we're trying so hard. It's become a 24/7 job for me to try and answer every question. Yeah, you know how that is. Yeah. So anyway, I hope that's not how you feel, really, because we've tried so hard.
The only reason that I feel like that is,
Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'll get Jenny after.
The only reason I feel like that sometimes is because we can't converse in the city.
You mean have a back and forth dialogue?
Correct. I mean, and then you guys go and talk at the very end, snippets, and that doesn't,
And that's why we're here tonight.
And I appreciate
And that's why we've got email and text and city Facebook and all of these other ways that you can also reach out to us. Because city council meetings can become like that planning commission meeting if we start having dialogue back and forth. And it just doesn't work in that type of a format.
Even here, we had to pick a controlled environment, control questions, and a controlled format to allow dialogue, and it is something that I recognize is challenging, but I appreciate that there's other options.
Yes. Jenny, I'm sorry.
No, I think like Joel said, most everybody that I speak with is wanting less development, less commercial, all of these things, which the current plan doesn't support. And so when we're giving our comments, it feels like, almost like there's a sense that we know better and this is the way it has to be, but you know, we'll kind of look at your comments instead of being incorporated into the plan. So I'm wondering if it's possible to even not do the finalized plan this fall, maybe spend a little bit more time, talk to people, get more community involvement, because it feels like if I go and do the survey, or my comments even gonna be incorporated, or is this just the way it has to be because you guys all know better, you know? So there's a sense of that for most people I speak with. And we're not actually involved in it, and will our comments actually change anything? Or we'll be like, well, that's nice, but we've already made up our mind, so.
Right. Well, we've opened that for a month and a half, and Dave started giving back the comments to the council that you've sent in, and we're looking over those. If we determine that more time is needed and that, you know, all the citizens' concerns haven't been addressed or looked at, then we definitely can take more time in order to do that.
The only requirement we have is that the state has mandated a portion of it, the moderate income housing portion. Well, they've said we have to have a moderate income housing plan as a portion of our general plan, and they gave us until the end of the year to incorporate that. It's very difficult to have a moderate income housing portion of a plan without the pieces of the whole plan, so that's why the timeline has always been to try to get that done as a whole. However, absolutely,
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but can we inform the state that we have made the decision on that part, but the rest of the plan is still pending?
yes, absolutely. Yeah, we could just adopt a moderate income housing plan and then keep
Call it
going. Yes, yeah, the three elements from the list is what they're requiring. We absolutely could do that. And I think again, I don't mean to put words in your mouth, Mayor, but what I hear you saying is that right now is the public comment period. This is exactly what we're trying to do. And then once that comes in, then the question is, was that enough public comment? Do we need to do more? Do we need to delay the process at that point to solicit more comment? The decision was made at the very beginning to generate a draft general plan and present that to the community for feedback. And I know it comes across as, well, this is the decision that was made on the general plan, take it or leave it. But that's not the process, and I'm sorry that it came across like that. I'm truly sorry that it came across like that, because the idea was, let's give them something to respond to. If an entire community is brainstorming together, it's very difficult. But I think we witnessed how easy it is to react to something and to see it on paper and say, no, that's not it, or yes, that is it. And so, again, I think it's up to the council at this point, once we get through the public comment period, to really prove it, right? That they're listening to the comments, and to make sure it doesn't come across again that the comment doesn't matter. Because my witness of what this council has done over the last year or so that I've been here is that they have incorporated that. Again, it probably doesn't feel like it, and I don't mean that in any kind of lip service or patronizing way or anything like that, because the perception is real, and I think the feelings are real, as you described. What makes you feel like that, and there's city responsibility that has created those feelings, and so we are committed. I know that the council and the mayor is committed to proving it, that we are soliciting the feedback right now. We are receiving feedback. I looked before I came, we're at 75 responses to the general plan right now. That's 10 more in a day, right? And in another 5 weeks, I would love for that to be 10 times, right? As much as we can get. I know that as a city, in my role personally, that I can do better in this back and forth. That when there are questions, when there are concerns, hopefully we can anticipate those and do a better job being on the front foot. It is really difficult to know what everybody wants to hear from the city and to try to anticipate all of that. But there are very clear things that I've recognized over the last little bit that are topics or issues that we can put out at different times, and we can be more engaging that way. So my commitment is to do a better job with that, and I want to tell you that I'm listening. I know that the mayor and council are listening, but again, right now you're still providing the feedback, and we can't prove that very well, at least on the general plan. Hopefully the dialogue here, the other things, a little bit at a time, we can prove again and again that we're trying to make decisions in the best interest of the current residents. Although future residents are part of the conversation or the thought.
You really want the mic.
I hope the message, for me, the message is, I hear you. I can't speak for the others, but I hear you, and I believe very strongly that when we get into the details of the general plan, that we will protect, right? When this is all said and done, we're mid-process. When the general plan is all said and done, I think you're going to be very, very pleased with it.
I just wanted to add that I have dialogue with council members all the time when they say, so-and-so brought up this to me. Do you think that is something that we could work into the plan? And so-and-so brought up this. Is this something we can incorporate? Or how would we make this work with these issues? And so that is happening all the time with the council. Just want you to be aware of that.
Great, thank you. All right,
There's one question that I just was, if you do not have internet, what is the way for those citizens to be able to do the comment on the general plan?
Okay, that's a good question. You don't have internet.
Two ways. We have the general plan survey and the maps ready at City Hall. You can always come into City Hall. Also, the public open houses was another way to come and do that. We have those scheduled for October 2nd and 3rd at the FAC, the Family Activity Center. So that will be, we'll have that, in paper format, and so you can respond that way. Yes, we know there's a segment of the community without internet like that.
All right, how are we doing on time? Do we have time for additional questions or people hanging in with us? So we got a whole crowd here. Excellent. We have another question. Ryan, you had a question you want to ask. Really loud, Ryan.
So I appreciate your sentiments and your goals for open communication, discourse, and discussion. But I've really only heard one actionable idea tonight, and that's that we should put the brakes on the general plan so that we can let the comments marinate and actually infiltrate the plan. I have another suggestion that's an actionable suggestion relative to the Lofts at Deer Run project. We have had, I think, the underlying concern, especially in the first segment of our discussion, was that there wasn't enough attention paid by the City Council to the process for changing the zone and entering the development agreement. Paul Sturm went through the development agreement and found on its face, after the document was executed, that we had a code issue with the number of units divided by the number of acres that were alleged to be in the project. Would it be possible, Mayor Joe, to appoint an advisory committee, and this is my suggestion, an advisory committee to oversee the process with the Lofts at Deer Run and any other special projects that we're getting this immense public comment on, to hold the City Council's feet to the fire in scrupulously overseeing those documents. What I'm saying is, I want Paul Sturm.
Thank you for
I want him to be
volunteering.
the enforcer on everything that goes through the City Council for approval with the Lofts at Deer Run. And this idea, I know that generally that's the whole point.
Not loud enough. Come stand right here. Here, come. No, you can stand right here and that's fine.
I understand that generally that's the point of government, right? We elect officials to represent us. I think that part of the issues we have as citizens is representation and accountability. And so what I think this special advisory committee suggestion that I'm making would do could be applicable to any special project, any project that's going to have a difficult time wrangling public comment, reconciling that with the general sentiment versus just the squeaky wheels, and then holding the people accountable, because these are the people that have a vested interest. And you've got your candidates right here. These are the people that have the vested interest, that are willing to put in the time, the countless hours, and put themselves out there to make sure that changes are made in the right way and at the right pace for the average citizen. We're not elected officials, but we do have concerns that we're willing to sacrifice and voice. What do you think about that idea?
I think that Dave probably has some comments on this, and that is definitely something that we could consider. We do have a city engineer, a city planner. We have people that look into the nuts and bolts of each of these developments, and so I'm concerned that might be undermining them a bit in that way. I mean, it's not.
That wouldn't be a bad thing.
That's our problem. We've lost trust.
How did we get there?
Yeah, I understand, your concern. I'm gonna turn it over to Dave.
I can't speak to the idea of the official committees, but I can tell you that Paul and I are working very closely on everything that he's found and researched about the lofts. It will be included in everything that we're looking at. So I don't know, again, that's a call from the mayor as far as the creation of an official advisory committee. But Paul and I are meeting regularly, and we are
once a week.
We are going over, right? The hard part is for the loft specifically, we are kind of waiting for the plans so we can review the plans.
Right, but I think that just springboards off of the concern that you had a developer, the city council had a developer's agreement that had an error in it, that was a code violation, and it was mathematical. So Paul did some division, discovered the error, but you had already consummated the agreement. So we don't want that to happen in this process of review and attention and detail. We have paid people to do this, but I dare say that those who volunteer would probably be a little bit more intensive in that review. And I'm not saying we need to give any individual citizen some weird executive power to make decisions. I'm just saying there are a group of citizens that have vested interests that are conflict-free because they're not in bed with the developers, and they don't have a financial interest. It's about preservation and conservation within the community. That I would be totally fine with having them frontline my voice.
Sure.
And the city council, who we're voting on, but this is just a little bit more project specific. Sure. I don't know, Mayor Joe, if that's even within your authority to appoint. It's just an idea, a hardline idea that I wanted to present.
And that goes back to the idea, sorry Ryan, I love to interrupt people.
That goes back to the idea that we can have a steering committee of citizens working with the city council to review the surveys, to review the information, to sit with the city council and with you and work together on understanding what's being said and making sure that, like you said, you think in the end we're going to be very pleased with the results of the general plan. We would like to be involved in the process of creating the results for the general plan, not waiting to find out what you decide we're going to like. And that is what we're asking with a steering committee, or we're asking for specific appointed people that can be involved in these projects. And we are here, we are willing to volunteer, we are ready to step in and ready to get involved at that level. So, do we have any other questions? Thank you, Ryan, and thank you. Do you have any other questions? Or Joe? Yeah, wants to respond.
So, I would consider that. I mean, I need to think more about this. I've just heard from mayors of other cities give horror stories on something that started with good intentions and became something that did not help the community. So I need time to process this and figure out how we would do it so that it could be made to work correctly and not actually hurt the city in the long run. So if you'll give me a chance to do that, I appreciate it.
Absolutely, I think that's very fair. All right, are we at a Dave has one more thing to say. Are we okay with that? And then the rest, if there's any other questions, we can follow up after. Okay. All right.
I feel a need to address one thing you said about staff being in bed with the developer, and I know for a fact that no money is changing hands. Every staff member is in it for community service. Yes, we get paid as staff members, I understand that. The idea that I've heard floated around that there is some kind of underhanded or under table or outside of public purview or anything like that, that there's money changing hands, that is patently false.
Thank you. All right. Do
we have time for one more question? Are people hanging on here? Okay, we aren't losing our audience. So Joel had one last question, and I have a final thing to say, and then looks like the mayor. There's one more thing without a raising.
Oh, no, I was just scratching.
She was just scratching. Joel, make sure you speak loudly, please.
I always do. Just going back to the general plan itself again, I think that as we've talked about all of the different issues tonight and the big questions that everybody has, I think moving forward is really what everybody is looking for, and how we're going to do that. And I think the general plan is just so important to that. And again, by reviewing a lot of these other plans, there's been a lot of good ideas from different cities and things that they've done. One of them, and I don't know if we even have this, but they have it where once the city has come together and made the general plan, that it is now part of the city ordinances, that if you want to do something that violates or goes against the city plan, it has to, by law or ordinance, go back through the city council and have a certain level of meeting and attention given to it. And I think that really the question right now is more a question of trust. And I don't think anything has happened to not make it so that we don't trust, other than the communication has not happened, so we've always felt like what's going on is not what we were looking at. And I do think that's more of a communication. So as we look at doing the general plan forward, can we put something in to the city that is willing to say, if we're going to go against the general plan, we're going to bring it up to this kind of level and get that kind of attention again. Because I think that makes it so that all of us feel a more comfort of, okay, as the next development comes in, we know it's going to follow the general plan exactly, or it's going to be brought to our attention up to that level. And that's wonderful.
He said he thinks that's wonderful. All right, I want to thank those of you who have joined us on Facebook tonight and have provided questions and comments. We are going to go through Facebook. We will gather all of these questions, and we will make sure that these get to David and Mayor Joe. And if you have any additional questions tonight, please email them and ask them. I also want to remind everyone to do their general plan survey. It's very clear that this is a crucial, crucial piece to what's going on in our city. And if we want our city government to listen to us, they have to hear us first. And I'm going to leave you with that, and hopefully we'll get to do this again. Everyone have a good night.